I want to start this video with something that might feel uncomfortable to admit. And I say that as someone who has spent years inside leadership development as both a participant and a facilitator. Most of what the industry today calls leadership training does not produce lasting behavioral change. And the reason it does not has nothing to do with the quality of the content or the caliber of the facilitators. No, it has nothing to do with that, or even the commitment of the participants. It has to do with a fundamental understanding of how the human mind actually works. So I would attempt in this video to correct that misunderstanding, not theoretically, but practically. I'm going to share some strategies and some tips that will be helpful to you, because once you understand what is actually going on in the minds of your leaders and inside your own mind, everything about how you develop people will have to change. And that's why this is really critical. You see, a few years ago, I was working with a senior project leader in a large infrastructure organization, exceptionally driven, highly regarded technically. And she had just returned from a 2-day leadership communication program that her organization had invested significantly in. When I sat with her 3 months later, I asked her what had changed, and she thought about it for a moment. And then she said something that has stayed with me. She said, "I know more than I did before, but I'm not doing anything different." That sentence, "I know more, but I'm not doing anything differently," is the single most expensive sentence in corporate leadership development. And I have heard some versions of it in almost every industry, in almost every country, from leaders at almost every level. They attend training programs, learning programs. The knowledge went, the behavior stayed the same. Why is that? The answer is simple: because the program in this case, in the case of this leader, changed her information. It did not change her wiring. And here is the critical distinction that most leadership development programs get entirely wrong. You see, information enters the conscious mind. Behavior is governed by the subconscious. Understand this. And unless a developmental intervention reaches deep into the subconscious level, unless it goes into the stored self-image and adjusts the operating picture, the creative subconscious will quietly, automatically restore the old path every time, not out of resistance, but out of design. That is what happened to her in this case. You see, the program gave her concepts that she could articulate, gave her frameworks. It did not touch the operating image that she held of herself as a communicator, as a leader. And so 3 months later, under pressure, under the volume of a real organization moving at real speed, she defaulted. She went back to the version of herself that her creative subconscious recognized as safe, as known to her. And that happens to every one of us. You see, there was this case in IBM by Gerstner, and what people have done studying what Gerstner did was focusing on the financials, but what they consistently underweighted with the turnaround of IBM was what Gerstner himself said that was the most important variable in the entire transformation. And I want to draw your attention to a specific phrase in what he said, not the famous part. It's the second part that rarely gets quoted. Gerstner said, "An organization is nothing away from the collective capacity of its people to create value." Collective capacity to create value. This is important to note. Not collective knowledge, not collective credentials, but collective capacity of what people can actually do when the conditions are real and the pressure is high and the strategy is in the room but the results are not. What will your team do when the room is on fire? You see, Gerstner did not retrain IBM's people in technical skills. He rewired the operating culture, and that required going into the subconscious patterns of an entire organization. The unspoken assumptions, the invisible hierarchies, the conditioned avoidances, and replacing them with a different set of operating beliefs. That is transformation. Everything else is information transfer. If you look deep down in your organization, I'm sure you're beginning to see where the gaps are. So let me make this more practical. Let me show you what rewiring actually looks like and how you can begin to apply it as a leader, not just as a concept. Just seeing it as a concept and probably a set of frameworks won't make any difference. There are three mechanisms that drive genuine, lasting behavioral change in organizations. Mechanism number one, changing the self-image ahead of the performer. How does this work? There's a framework that's called the attitudinal balance scale. Every thought you think about yourself, about your capability, your identity, your right to operate at a higher level is either adding weight to the side of belief or to the side of doubt. And the side that carries more weight governs your automatic behavior, not your intention, but your automatic behavior. So whether you are feeding your side of doubt, you're feeding the side of belief, that will impact the way you perform. The implication for leadership development is profound and is almost entirely ignored in many cases. Before you put a leader into a high stakes role, a more visible position, a more complex team, you need to invest in expanding their internal image of who they are in that context, not their confidence in the abstract, their specific, concrete, neurologically embedded belief that they belong in that room, that they can run the conversation, that they are the right person for that scale of work. That is a lot of work for you to do before you put the person in that room, because without that, no amount of skill building will hold. Because under pressure, people revert to their self-image, not their training. Now, mechanism number two, whole brain integration, not single dimension development. Nasimov's framework of the four intelligences gives us something that most leadership development programs do not, and that is a map of the whole person as a business instrument. Now, here is what this means. Most organizations develop leaders along one axis, typically the financial acumen or technical expertise, and then they stop there. But a leader who is exceptionally strong in analytical processing but has not developed their emotional and behavioral awareness will make decisions that are logically sound and relationally catastrophic every time, without any exception. Because here's the thing, genuine development expands leaders across all four dimensions simultaneously. And that requires a different intervention, one that is facilitative rather than instructional, one that creates the conditions for the leader to discover their gaps, not just receive information about them. Mechanism number three, connecting as a leadership discipline, not a personal trait. This is where John Maxwell becomes essential. And I want to be very careful here, because this is one of the most misunderstood ideas in leadership communication. John Maxwell was quite direct in this, and he said that connecting with others is a skill. It is not a gift. It is not something that some people have and others do not. It is learnable, practicable, and it is an improvable capability. And the leaders who do not develop it, regardless of how technically excellent they are, they always hit a ceiling. But here is what makes this mechanism distinct from the other two. Connection is not developed in isolation. It is developed through consistent practice and the actual interactions of leadership, the one-to-one, the team meetings, the difficult conversations, the moment when a project is going sideways and someone needs to feel that their leader sees them and is with them. So you cannot develop the skill of connection in isolation. You need to do it within a space where you have other people too. Maxwell breaks connection into four components: what people see, what people understand, what people feel, and what they hear. And the leaders that are generating the most friction in your organization are almost certainly missing at least two of those four. Not because they do not care, but because they have never had a development experience that helped them to understand and practice all four simultaneously. This is what wiring looks like when it is done. You are not just filling a leader's head with better frameworks. You are restructuring the experience of leadership from inside out. You are changing who they believe they are and how they process the full complexity of their environment, and how they actually show up in the human moments that determine whether the people follow them or simply comply with them. Now, here are three specific actions this week. Each one targets a different mech. I'm going to share them with you so that you can implement them in your organization. Action number one, have one conversation this week where you begin from a point of curiosity rather than from your agenda. Number two, before your next significant one-to-one, write down 3 questions about the other person's experience, not about the project, not about the deliverable, but how they are experiencing their work. Then open the conversation with those questions. Listen for the full 2 minutes before you respond. You are not practicing empathy as a soft skill, it's a strength. So you are practicing connection as a performance instrument, and you will likely learn something about what is generating friction in that relationship that no performance dashboard will probably show you. So this is really key. Action number 2 this week: identify one leader on your team whose self-talk about their capability is visibly holding them back. Well, here in this case, we are not referring to their technical capabilities, their belief about their right to operate at that level that you need them to. You will recognize this leader because they consistently underclaim in meetings. They hedge when they should commit. They phrase their best ideas as questions. This is not humility, this is self-image that has not yet caught up with their actual capacity. Your job this week is not to give them more feedback on their performance. It is to give them a specific, evidenced, direct statement about who you see them becoming. One sentence said with full conviction, because the right word from the right person at the right moment shifts an attitudinal balance scale in a way that 3 months of feedback never does. Action number 3, in your next meeting, create one moment of genuine acknowledgement before the actual meeting starts, before you move into business. This is not a preamble. This is not a formality. It's a real specific human acknowledgement of something that someone in the room had done well, maybe navigated with skill, or probably showed up for under pressure. Name it, be specific, and then move into the agenda. Why is this important? It's important because what you are doing in that moment is not team building in the conventional sense. You are demonstrating to every person in that room that you see them as a full human being and not just a function, not numbers. And that signal, which costs you just about 30 seconds, generates that discretionary effort and psychological safety that no incentive structure can buy. See, humans don't really need many things. They just need connection. I said at the start of tonight that most leadership trainings or training programs do not produce lasting behavioral change. And I want to end with the full truth of that statement. A leadership training program or development program does not, when it stays on the surface, when it deposits new frameworks into an unchanged subconscious and calls that development, when it mistakes awareness for transformation, then it does not bring about true change or lasting change. But when a development goes into the wiring, when it touches the self-image, when it generates the full spectrum of leadership intelligence, when it builds connection as practiced discipline, then it produces something that is entirely different. What does it produce? It produces leaders who do not just know what to do. It produces leaders who are wired to do it automatically, under pressure, in the room where it truly matters. So if you are in a leadership role right now, I have one question for you. And here's the question. What is the most significant gap between who you need to be and who you actually show up as when the pressure is highest? Where is the gap? Where does that gap exist? That gap is not a character flaw. It is a development opportunity that most leadership programs have never been designed to reach. And so I want you to do this. Drop a word in the comment section that describes where that gap leaves for you. Listen, I would read it and I would respond. And what you share there would probably shape the next conversation that could change your career, that could change your leadership style. My name is Stallone-Obaraemi Samuel, and my sincere desire for you, my friend, is that you go on succeeding by becoming a better version of yourself. Bye for now.